So I'm recording. This is going to be an interesting class. I've gone through the whole class in my head, but this is my first time giving this as a lecture because I realize there's so many little things we kind of miss along the way in different classes where we're focusing on stuff. And today is sort of one of my tips and tricks day. Let's look at the schedule really quick, just to kind of talk about where we are. Not a lot to really notice here, except for this giant gap of time we have starting today going through about 2 weeks from now. So basically 3 weeks from now, milestone 4 is due. This gap of time is very easy to fall into some traps. How many of you have done your layout? Cool, so a couple people have. Awesome. If not, you probably should get started on that because you need to be blocking relatively soon. What is due on milestone 4 is a blocking pass of all shots edited together in order. This is with audio and everything. So basically a play blast version of your full film, right? We should be able to watch it and give you your first animation critique on it. Because only a few weeks after that is your presentation of, a week and a half after that is your presentation of your production pass. And that's the timed presentation where you basically give us the fully animated film. Like that's the end of production. That is the big grade, right? That's the grade that that one and the last one are the ones I'm going to be sort of the hardest on, right? Primarily because those are the two that are going to tell us if you're going to actually get this project finished. That pre-production presentation, it was, are you on the right track? And I feel like for the most part, everybody was. This stretch here is like kind of getting to the, to the meat and potatoes of actually animating, right? So hopefully in this next couple of classes, you're going to be able to start getting your animation done. I know there's a couple of you who are needing that animation face tutorial. I worked on that over this weekend. There is a video that is already online that I can share with you that is a pretty simple version of what I was going to cover. Having said that, I'm still kind of working a few of the kinks out of how I want to show this to you, and I don't want to present something that seems confusing, so I'm kind of postponing that one until next class period, at which point I'll sort of show you how that works. If you want to do a simple one, I could show you that very quickly. Basically, it's just an image sequence, and then we break the connection that is using time to drive those frame changes, and hook up some rigging to that to make that work. But what that means is you have to have all of the exact face poses you're going to need. So if you need your character's mouth open and the eyes closed, you need to have a mouth open for the eyes open and a mouth open for the eyes closed, right? And so you always have to make more face poses for it, and then you just pick from a long drop down list. What I want to show you how to be able to do is to break the face apart into pieces and have those all being driven by different elements. Any kind of what you have going on right now with that little character you're looking at, that's one way of doing it, but we can also do it with layered textures, which means you have one material that has multiple texture maps that all have transparencies on them, and then you can drive those map changes individually. So I've worked out a rough version of it, but it's still like, I feel like at the point it is right now, it's going to be a little confusing if I try to present it today. So instead, I thought I would just talk about animation. For the most part, this class is usually one of the more attentive ones, but this is one where I would strongly encourage you to just kind of pause whatever you're doing on the computer and watch this, because I'm going to go through a lot of like quick problem-solving techniques. I'm also going to try to call on you all a little bit to ask some questions. So. Yes, and I know all of your names, all of them. Huh?
I said no participation.
No participation. Okay, so any questions about the schedule, the exercises? All right. So how's it going for you? How are you feeling about the project right now? I'm behind. How many of you feel like you're a little behind?
But I'm on schedule on my schedule.
Yeah. That's okay. That's why we're sort of doing something up. The reason I want you to kind of watch today is because I think some of these tricks will save you some headache in the future in terms of animation, right? Huh? Right. That's why I'm here, to make your life easier. Actually, it's to make your life more difficult, but then give you tools on how to navigate, so in turn making your life easier. So I'm going to start off with a hypothetical question. I want some milk. So let's say I gave you that challenge. I want some milk. Would somebody go get me some milk? Like, what would be? How would you solve that? What would be your first attempt at that? Amy, what would you do?
You drive up to Kroger and give me some milk.
Kroger. Okay, cool. Other Amy
Go to
Schrader.
the store on campus and get the milk.
Go to the store.
Yeah, maybe you walk too.
Okay, so yeah, Kroger, you have to navigate that hill and not get ran over, right, if you're walking. If you're driving, it's maybe a little faster. Andrew?
I have some in my dorm.
There's some in your dorm. Some dorm milk.
Yeah.
May or may not still be good. If I recall dorm milk correctly. Where does milk come from? So, why was your answer not, I would go milk a cow and bring you some milk? Too much work, technical skills. That milk's probably pretty gross and got little hairs in it and stuff, and I don't want that one. Right. So Amy, why did you choose the campus option at the campus store?
Because I go there often and it's easy to walk to.
So that was easy. That was an easy solution, right? To walk over to Kroger. Do you go to Kroger a lot? There's Walmart too. And you're like, I can hop in the car and run to Kroger. Andrew, dorm milk, because everybody else chose Kroger already.
It's good stuff, yeah.
It's good stuff. He's like, I've already tried it. It's pretty good. The reason we don't choose cow, even though cow is a solution, right, is because it is not the most efficient, most optimized solution, right? And so I showed you that because I wanted to point out you already know how to make strategic decisions for hard challenges, right? Everything that we do in digital media is in some way or another a problem that has to be solved. Somebody gives you a puzzle and says, how do you work out this puzzle? And you already, just by being alive, have some problem-solving skills, right? You made it this far, so that means you worked out applying to financial aid, right? You worked out filling out the application. You managed to get here into this building and get your card encoded and all that stuff that you have to do, right? So you're able to solve problems. Yet for somehow, when we get into digital media, sometimes that problem-solving skill just kind of goes out the window. And I think that that's partially the way we learn digital media is to follow a tutorial or an example, right? I'm like, okay, we're going to rig a character today, and so we start putting joints in a character, and then later you get a character and you're like, this is a blob. How do I rig my blob? And you're like, oh, rigging, that means joints. So I start making joints. But maybe that's not actually the answer, right? The thing that I see this the most in is I need water. Like I need water in a cup, right? And everybody says, water, where does water come from? Oh, it's Bifrost, right? And that's the equivalent of milking the cow, right? Like that is overkill for that milk when there are so many more optimized ways of getting it. You go to Bifrost when you need a very specific thing. I mean, you need water that is flowing and changing dynamically in every frame. If you need water in a glass that never moves, a cylinder with a texture on it works just fine, right? And so I know some of this we've already covered in other classes on how to think strategically, but sometimes animation seems to fall into this category where everybody just does the brute force solution for animation, right? So I wanted to try a couple of things. I wanted to show a handful of different tricks that may speed up the way you solve problems and may also give you a non-linear way of thinking about solving those problems, right? Because if I said we need to animate a moon orbiting the Earth and the Earth orbiting the sun, right? And it came time to start animating that moon, like you basically need this like spirograph path of this moon, right? Let's go ahead and make that scene really quick. I'll go ahead and do it from the top view. I have this moon out here. I want it to be circling my Earth right here. And I want all that to be circling the sun, which is back here at 0 again, right? Now, to get this path to happen, and if I just start setting S and trying to animate this thing like going around the sun over and over again, or going around the Earth over and over again, like I'm just going to get tons of these like linear keyframes. I have to go in here and set all of this stuff. Some of you already see where I'm going with this. What is the easier way to get that orbit? Change the pivot point and rotate it, right? So really when we say we're needing this to move, we need that object to move, but we need that object to move from a different orientation, right? So I don't really want to mess with that object's pivot point specifically. I just want to be able to rotate it. So let's go ahead and name these really quick. Moon, Earth, Sun, right? So if I want this object to be able to rotate around the center of this object, I could just hit Insert, right, or D, both of them do the same thing, and I can change my pivot point to here, right? And then when I hit E, I can rotate this around here, and now I'm just animating that one channel to get my orbit, right? However, I don't really want to mess with my pivot point just in case I need to manually set some keys on that later. So in that case of trying to preserve this motion or this sort of structure, I'm just going to group my moon. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control G on my moon, and I'll call this moon group, right? And what is that? And moon group now has a pivot point at the center of the Earth, or at the center of the sun, right? It's not necessarily where I wanted it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that pivot point. I can use Insert to move it, or I can use D to move it. I also wanted to show you that I can snap to stuff. So if I hold down V, it will allow me to snap to a point, like a vertex or or a corner or something like that. So if I just hold down V while I'm moving this, I can snap it to the center of my Earth, right there. And now if I animate this rotation on this moon, right, I can get this orbit, right? So it's orbiting the Earth. Let's go ahead and do that. I want to have it orbit let's say every 40 frames. Okay, so S, I'm going to rotate it all the way around 360 degrees. Crap. 40 frames, there we go. 360. So let's set my keyframe on that. Sorry, chose the wrong one, didn't I? It's Y. There we So now let's go look at my graph editor. Okay. Animation, I get this curve, right? Now the thing about this curve is it's easing in and out at the beginning and the end, right? Which means if I hit play on that, sorry, it's playing at the end of it. So playing it real time, you'll notice what happens is at the end of it and the beginning of it, it kind of starts off like it accelerates and then it slows down at the end, right? So I could repeat this over and over again, but right now it's got that ease in and ease out at the beginning. The moon never slows down so you can take a picture. Right? It keeps moving at the constant rate. And so that means I would go into my graph editor on that group, right? And I would go ahead and just set all that to linear. Right? And so now it's going to feel like it's moving at a constant rate all the way around, right? Now it's starting and stopping though, right? So something to think about is the moon never starts, the moon never stops, right? I mean, I guess the moon started at some point, but, and I guess it will stop at some point, and that's going to be a sad day, because we'll all die. But that's a long time from now. Don't sweat that. We want this moon to continue orbiting for infinity, right? And luckily, Maya has the concept of infinity built into it, right? Because really what's happening right now is I stopped giving it instructions after frame 40, right? Frame 1, I gave it an instruction. Frame 40, I gave it an instruction. It got to the end of that, and it was just like, I'm just going to keep obeying the last thing you told me on frame 40, right? For infinity. I can set this thing to be 1,000,000 frames long, and for the concept of infinity we can manage, it will continue to hold that location of 365 or 360 degrees of a rotation for infinity. Right? The way we can tell that is if I go to View in the graph editor and click infinity, we can see that curve continuing off into infinity, right? See that little green highlight there? Now, the thing that's kind of neat is we have the option of telling Maya what to actually do with infinity. Right now, it's just stay constant, right? But I could actually change this under curves for pre-infinity and post-infinity. So this is before the beginning of my motion and after the end of my motion. Right now it's set to constant. I could make it oscillate. I could make it cycle. I could make it cycle with an offset. I'm going to make it, if I hit cycle, watch what happens. So it's kind of going to work, but really what's happening is at the end of this, it's immediately snapping back to the beginning of my curve, and it's just going to repeat that forever, right? I could select this and say curves post-infinity cycle with offset, and that curve is just going to continue to climb forever, right? Like look at that, it's just going to continue to climb forever, up and up and up and up and up. Which means like if we're way out here, you'll see the number of rotation here is like 352,000, right, by frame 3000, right? But that's really what we're getting, is we're just getting this thing continuing to loop forever and ever and ever into infinity. Right? Look at that. Isn't that nice? So that's just that little hitch is just the end of my timeline happening. Because I did it over 40 frames instead of something that made sense, right? So let's go ahead and extend this out so we can see it a little longer. Let's do like 300, right? So let's say that's not all I wanted though. Let's say I also wanted both the Earth and this moon in the group to pivot around this, right? To pivot around the sun. So I'm going to grab those two and hit G, or Control G again. And so now I have another group, right? And this can be Earth orbit, or Earth robot orbit group. And with that Earth orbit group, I could do the same thing, right? I'm going to do it over a longer period of time. Now I'm going to do it over, let's say, let's go ahead and say 300, right? I'll go ahead and hit S on frame 1. I'll go ahead and go to the end of 300, do my rotate Y, 360. Again, I'll go ahead and set that curve to linear. And what we're going to get now is this, right? Which is really what we wanted, right? And that's way easier to animate than our original attempt at setting keyframes on that move. I was actually able to do it with 4 keyframes, right, and a couple of groups to get this to orbit infinitely, right? However, like we have some broken elements to this that could be like, what if I needed the Earth to, like a planet to hit this or something like that, like crash into the moon and destroy it, right? I get this thing that's constantly orbiting, and that's not really the path it would follow, right? So there's things I could do to this to fix that. I'm gonna kind of show you that with another solution, right? Because we can do this on a single object if we wanted. Let's say what I wanted was file, new scene, don't save. Let's say I have this polygon cylinder, right? Put this down. Make it taller. Put a sphere out here. This. I'm going to go ahead and put some divisions in this as well. Some height divisions. Let's try like that. So I got this cylinder, I got this sphere, right? And I want this to like spiral up this pole, right? So we could do a similar attempt for this. We don't even have to group it. I was just showing you grouping as a way of nesting these animations, right? So what I could do, I could go ahead and hit insert, put my pivot point back into the center of this. So X will snap to grids. So I can snap my grid point all the way back to the beginning of this, right? And I could do a quick set of keyframes, let's say 30 frames from here to all the way around 360. Work. Yeah, so we're still getting that, right? I'm going to do the same thing again with my keyframes. Translate, or sorry, it's rotate Y. Set that to linear. View our infinity. Curves post infinity. Cycle with offset, right? So what we're going to get now, is this doing this. And since we know how the graph editor works, that means I just need some translate Y up to make that continue to climb, right? So let's just do 30 frames there as well, right? Let's go ahead and move this up, say 10 units, right? And you'll see what I get is it climbs at 10 units and then it stops, right? And the reason for that is because I haven't set any cycle options on this. I haven't set anything for infinity, right? So if I were to go in here, again, set this to linear, curves, post infinity, cycle with offset, it's just going to keep climbing up my pole, right? Now let's say I wanted to climb faster. What do I do? So that could work. I could shorten the number of keyframes on my translate Y, but really that just means I need this curved slope to go up more, right? And so right now we have over 30 keyframes. It climbs 10 units, right? I could just make that 15 instead, right? And watch what happens when I do that. If I go here and select this. Right now that's at 10. If I just change that to 15, the rest of the slope of that curve climbs too. So now it climbs more sharply. So let's try this. I want a second ball, right? I want a second ball that's orbiting on the other side, but I've already animated this one. It didn't take that long. I could probably make another one and do the same thing. But I just want to duplicate this ball that has animation on it already, okay? So I'll show you how to do that. If we go to Edit, if I just hit Duplicate, it's going to duplicate that object, but that object's not going to have any keyframes on it, right? If I need that object to have keyframes on it, I hit Control-Z to get rid of that. I do Edit, Duplicate Special, and I always get these confused, so I have to try it again. I think I do Duplicate Input Graph. And if I hit Duplicate on that, there we go. Now I have two spheres that have the exact same input graph. So even though I have two of them, though, they're right on top of each other. So for P-Sphere 2, what I'm going to do is just go in here to my Rotate Y, and I'm just going to scale this down until it's on the other end. I mean, I guess I could do this manually. I could do like this, right, until it's over there. But if I wanted to be exact, I could just do some math. I could just say this is negative 180, and this is positive 180. And so the slope of my, 180. The slope of my climb is still the same, right? And what I get now, right, is that. So, again, I just wanted to kind of show you these, these are not earth-shattering tricks, but these are quick ways in which you can get some pretty neat animation and making animation work like smarter for you, not having to put in tons and tons of manual work to get that animation, right? I mean, I think a great example of this for me is leveraging arcs to your advantage, right? I'm just going to kind of go off to the side and show you this. If I wanted a character to look like they were swinging on a swing, right, from my front view, from my right view, the easiest way to do that, to make a swing, super thin so you can see it, is to group those two things and move my pivot point to the top and just rotate that, right? Like, this is just an easy way of getting that. Now, in terms of getting these deformations in here, that can sometimes be a little more difficult. So, but it's not that hard. Like we already see how to do a blend shape or a bend deformer. But this is most of our work for us, right? Of something swinging. Okay. So back to our spinning pole here. Part of the reason I show you this is because you're going to get an assignment at different times in your career where the art director is going to say, "Hey, go do this," right? The animation director, "Hey, go do this," and you're going to do it, and it's going to look great, and you're going to take it back to the art director, and they're going to change their mind, right? And that is a problem. That is a more complex go to the store and get milk, right? This is I meant chocolate milk, right? And so I read a study the other day, which is if you need a reason to go out and vote, 17% of the people polled believe chocolate milk comes from brown cows. So please go vote. I'm like,
how seriously were they taking this poll?
Yeah.
Are you telling me nothing?
So our percentage here, yeah, that's about right. But there's solutions to that, right? Some of you would be like, all right, I'll go back to the store and get some more milk. But what if I'm like, I want chocolate milk now, right? Like there's solutions for that. Maybe you're like, fine, I got some chocolate syrup like outside in the refrigerator or something. Or you go downstairs and you get some chocolate out of Rodino's candy dish and you melt it in the microwave and you pour it in the milk, right? Just to appease my spoiled butt. I want milk. But that's what your art director is going to be like. Like they're going to make changes on you that you're going to be like, really? Like, why couldn't you told me that before? And so what if they said, oh wait, no, the pole isn't straight. Like that pole has a curve in the middle of it. You didn't know that? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like that's why you could have told me. Yeah. And if you want to keep your job, you can't say, well, go do it yourself then, right? You haven't. That's why you're there, is to solve these problems, right? And so when those problems happen, being able to adapt to that quickly is important, right? So I want to show you this. This is a couple of different ways we could treat this, right? Which is, let's go ahead and just put a bend in this pole. Go to front view. Select these vertices. Hit B, get some soft select on there. Put this bend in this pole, right? Go back to perspective view. And so now, now some of our stuff is going through the pole. It doesn't work right? So we just have one curve in there that's not that big of a deal, right? So I mean, I could very easily go in there and just add a keyframe, right? I could go in here and say, this is my translate X, I guess, right? So I could just go in here halfway through, let's say right about here, and just add another keyframe on my translate X that pulls it over to here, and sort of hope that that kind of works. Really didn't. And the reason it didn't is because that bend is not halfway between that motion, right? That bend is toward the end of the first rotation. So really the problem with this now is that I have a cycling loop that's working well for me, but I have a change in that motion that I need to be able to add some keyframes to, right? And I mean, there's a couple of different ways I could do this. So I'm going to show you my ideal way of sort of treating this, but I'll show you a couple of other ways that may work as well. Which is to introduce you to animation layers. How many of you have ever animated with layers before? Anybody? All right, cool.
2D sense.
In a 2D sense, okay. This is different. Animation layers is an additive motion, okay? So we already have this perfect motion spiraling up, and I could go through all the work of like trying to adapt that to this curve. But really, all I need, if you think about this in a clear-headed way, is when it's at the bottom here, it's in the right spot. When it's at the top, which is about frame, let's say about frame 50, 57, 55, something like 56, it's in the right spot. Right? It's just right here in the middle, right around frame 30, that it's not, right? If I were to change frame 30, I guess that works, and then I could go out here and add an extra keyframe later to bring it back in, right? But then I'm really just like kind of brute forcing it again, right? And so that kind of works. But let's say my art director doesn't necessarily know how much he wants that pole bent, right? And I just don't want to keep having to go back and rework this. So I'm like, come on over here, sit down next to me, art director, let's work this thing out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those two balls, right, and I'm going to go to animation layers. So over here, we already know our design layers, right, our model layers, where we can turn stuff on and off and hide it. Animation layers works a little bit differently, right? So let's say, I'll just show you some examples in a bit. But let's say, just sort of try to think through this. I have one motion, right, where this one thing is happening, and I have these pristine curves that I don't want to mess up. But I need that entire thing to sort of go around a curve or twist or turn or whatever. then I can add a second layer of animation on top of that will keep my clean animation below it, and I can have simpler curves on top of that in order to adjust it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the things I need to add a layer to, just these two right now, right? And I'm just going to click this button right here, which is create a layer from selected. I'm doing this so it will add the objects that are selected into a layer. Now when I do that, I get two layers, right? I get my base animation, which is where all these curves I already have are stored. If I go to my animation layer though, you'll see that there are no curves on this yet, okay? So we already said my keyframe or my location on frame 1 is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and go there just to sort of nail that down and say, you're fine there, don't worry, right? And then I'm going to go to the end, it was about frame 56-ish, right? And say, you're fine there, don't worry, right? But around frame 30, that's where I need that change to happen, right? I can go there and set a keyframe. And so you'll notice all of my curves now, there's no rotation on that Y anymore. That's all on my base layer. I have another layer now that just moves the objects from side to side. If you want to kind of see that, you can mute and turn off these layers, but it's going to combine those two different animations to get that, right? Let's say I wanted to make it even more complicated. Let's say right about here, I wanted this to also kind of rotate. It's probably not going to work right. Let's sort of say I'm going to move them one at a time, right? Let's see what this does. I may completely be breaking this. Let's try it and see. Something like that. And then right about here, I want this one to be a little lower, this one to be a little higher. So it just looks a little bit more dynamic, right? So I just did that on a completely separate layer. And the way you can tell is there's a little mute option here. See this button right here? It's going to mute that layer that I just created those keyframes on, and you'll see that on my base animation, I still have that original animation, right? Let's get this back where we can see it a little bit better. I still have that original animation. If I click this, I can turn it back on, right? And now I got those extra added layers to it, right? And this is so much simpler than trying to make all of those keyframes of that object orbiting. Now, here's an interesting thing. This layer that I have here, you'll notice that there's a weight on it, right? Look, who's in the back? There's Forrest. Come on in, Forrest. Oh, somebody let Forrest in. Forrest is a recent graduate. Welcome, Forrest. So this is 3D animation, so we're talking about animation layers today. So we have this like twisting, turning thing going on here, right? This is our weight for that layer, right? So I can turn that down and only get a portion of some of those changes I made. I can turn it all the way up, and this value is keyframeable. I can keyframe the weight of this layer. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock that. Well, I guess it's locked because I'm moving. I'm going to go ahead and unlock that. I'm going to turn off that new layer that I just made. Okay? And I'm going to make another layer and show you another way in which we could do this with layers. Right? So I'm going to create a new layer. Right? And on this layer, I'm just going to set one keyframe right here about halfway, right? I'm going to set that over here. Let's go ahead and hit S. Right? So really now my entire animation is over there, right? And so that means that that's not what I wanted either, right? But what I can do is I can keyframe how much that layer is influencing my base animation. So I have, at the beginning of this, I'll say I don't want it influencing it at all. So key that, right? And at the end of it, I also do not want it influencing it at all. But in the middle, right here, right around frame 30, I want it influencing it completely. Keyframe that. And so basically what I did is I just keyframed on and off the influence of a correction layer. Okay? Now here's the really interesting thing. These are additive, right? So I still have both of those layers. I just muted one. So if I uncheck this, why did that not work? Oh wait, I may have this set to absolute. Anyway, I thought that was going to add it on top of it. Oh well, never mind. Yeah, usually whatever's on top affects it last. But there's a different setting you can have for each of these. So there's absolute, and then there's, let's see, where's it at? Layer mode, additive or override. And so override means that if you make a change on it, it's not going to add it to it, it's going to overwrite the animation below it. And there's reasons to use that, but yeah, let's not really worry about that one too much right now. Either way, both of these are good solutions, right? Let's say I don't want all these animation layers. I want to be able to edit all of those keyframes together, okay? So one of the things I can do, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one because I actually like the other version better. I like this one. I messed something up on it. Oh, that's why it's not adding it. Somehow I messed it up. Well, let's undo a little bit, see if I can get back to that point before I made that one. Let's go forward again. Really? Maybe it's where I unlocked that layer. What did I do? I must have... Huh? Yeah, it's all right. We'll redo it. So, lock it just on this layer. Oh! Let's turn the weight back up. There we go. That makes more sense. Okay, and actually, that I think that's why that wasn't showing earlier when I made the second layer, the weight layer. It will duplicate that motion, so it will transform it twice over to the side instead of once. So I can show you more of that later, right? So we get this, but let's say I wanted all of this down on one layer. I just want to be able to edit the curves and see what those curves look like. If I select both of these, I can right click and say merge layers. I'm going to choose my options box. And basically it's going to merge everything down. I usually choose Smart Bake because it doesn't leave me with thousands of keyframes. I can hit merge. And what I should have now is one animation layer with each of those balls doing exactly the rotation and the pivot that we want it to do. Is that right? Is that all that's really happening on? I guess so. I guess it just made very subtle changes to it to get that out of it. I think that translate Y would have a little bit of something on it. Yeah, it does. So that's exactly the motion that we need now, and it's baked down onto a single key. Right? The cool part about all of that is like those are so easy to edit. The other thing is it makes for a lot of reuse on your animation. So let me check something really quick. Let's find a character animation. Open scene. Set my project somewhere up on the network. So this one's a little, oh, let's go one. So this is a probably not a finished animation of a character running. This is something I was doing in class for another class. Show none, show polygons, so you can see them here. And of course, show my NURBS curves. So I've got motion on all of this. And this is where this really comes in handy, is if your art director comes to you and says, you know what though, he needs to be leaning forward more, and he needs to have his arms pulled back more, or he needs to be like, you know, maybe he's crouching, right?Maybe what you were really supposed to be going for was more of a defensive run, like where he sort of curled in. And when you just look at that as like, I gotta edit all of those curves, right? Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and select my entire character, the entire rig, and I'm going to add an animation layer on here. I'll call it corrective, let's just say pose change 1, because we're going to try some other pose changes too, right? All I have to do is make a change on this layer, to sort of address those concerns, right? Something like this. Character's head down. Maybe I want to lean him into this a little bit more, right? Curl him into this a little bit more. So all of this is so dynamically different than what we had earlier, right? And maybe curl this out just a little bit. So something like this, I broke his shoulder a little bit, so let's fix that if we can. And then with all these controls selected, I'm just going to set one keyframe. Stupid auto key. Let's try that again. Sorry. Let's just set one keyframe now on this, and then auto key will fix it. So again, I'm going to lean him in, rotate him, maybe even move him a little further forward. I'm really going to push it. Make him more defensive. Something like this. It's off. Push his weight over this way a little bit. Since he's leaning like that, I'm going to rotate one of his feet. Maybe even pull that foot forward a little bit more. Maybe rotate them both just a little bit. See what we get out of that. So now it's almost like a sideways run. Fix his broken head. And again, select all these. Make sure those things keyed. And what we should get is now the entire run is like that. Now he's got that big arm swing that's happening there that's really kind of messing stuff up, right? And so I can always bake this down and go back to the pose. Here's the cool thing. Let's say I show this to my art director and they're like, oh, it's a little too much. Like you pushed him a little too far. So I just grab this layer and start pulling it back. And I'm like, how about there? Is that feeling better? And he's like, yeah, that's it, right? Or she is like, yeah, that's it. So this is a really nice way of doing this, right? Now there's still a couple of little things that are messed up in here, right? So for me, like a big one is his right arm is swinging too big, right? And so I can do corrective poses throughout that as well, right? I can make one layer that is just his arm controls. So let's grab these controls, that, and that. Create a new layer. We'll call this arm swing fix. And so what we see is here it's okay. So I'll go ahead and set a keyframe on all those controls there. There it kind of swings through too big. But then, like, to me, there it's okay again. I really need to see the length of this animation. It ends at base animation. Seems to end on frame 20, right? So that means if I go back up here, grab that. I set those keyframes on the wrong layer, I think. There we go, arm swing fix. So I'm on the right layer. There it's okay. Frame 20 is this loop cycle, so there it's okay. It's really just this swing right there that feels a little too much to me, right? So I'm almost going to counter animate that. On frame 10, I'm just going to go back here and just kind of make that swing not so big, right? Pull back on some of this clavicle stuff. And so now that's a little more manageable, right? He also kind of swings it back there a little more than maybe we need for this. So I'll calm that down as well. Oh, I don't have my animation layers looping forever, so we can really just see it right there on frame 20. So I was able to calm that down. Now, animation layers is actually usually what people use to clean up motion capture. How many of you are interested in cleaning up motion capture? There is not a lot of money to be made in that, but there are a lot of motion capture projects, and inevitably you're going to eventually have to. It's not the funnest projects, but I think it's worth recognizing that once you're in a studio, what you're trying to do is get the project finished, right? While you're in class, you're like, I'm trying to make work that makes me look awesome, right? But once you get hired, then it's just about that, like, you're coming to work and you're doing your job every day, right? And top priority as a team is getting the project finished. And sometimes you're like, I want to keyframe this character because I really want to do this performance, but we got so much animation to get done, so let's just finish all these other pieces up with motion capture and clean that up. Here's the interesting thing with motion capture. What you get out of motion capture is a freaking mess, right? It is like, I will show you what motion capture data looks like. If I select every, I'm going to go ahead and mix all these down really quick. Merge my layers. So it merged all of them down. What motion capture data looks like is if I go to edit, or I'm sorry, modify, no, it is under edit, isn't it? Edit keys, bake simulation. It's that. There's a keyframe on every frame of your curves. Okay? Bless you. And so if you're like, oh, the character's hips are going up and down too much, and you go and grab that key and you find it's on translate Y, this is what your curve looks like. And so to make that go higher, you can't just grab that point and raise it. You have to grab all of this stuff, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of quick tools that make this easier. One is actually just here in the graph editor. If I go to Edit, Transformation Tools, and this Move Keys tool, choose my options box. I think it's this. Yeah. This is just the Move tool settings here. And right now my Move Fall Off is set to constant. Right? And that means that it's just this one key that I move, right? There's no fall off at all. If I select linear, what happens when I move this key? Nothing. What's happening? Linear? Impressive, huh? Exponential? Maybe I have to select it new after I do that. What is happening?
There's a little something happening on that one.
Edit, transformation tools.
Just moving it on the next page, it's just not going any further.
Constant. Oh. W. Yeah, this is kind of doing it. So, oh, it's because I just had those two selected. What am I thinking? So if I grab something like this, I can do this. So it's kind of like a soft select for your curves, right? So let's say by the end of this, I need my character to be in a slightly different pose. I can grab the end key and sort of scale this whole thing and have him continue to rise as he moves, and then start this at a lower pose, right? Grab all of this, middle click. And so you'll notice throughout his run, he gets taller, right? So there's some keys you can use for that to manipulate massive amounts of data at once, right? Massive amounts of keys at once. But really the easiest way to fix all of this is just an animation layer, right? Instead of digging through all of these curves, we just add a new layer to correct things and fix the little things that we need to fix, okay? So, animation layers kind of making sense? Okay. They're hard for me because I never really think to use them in other situations other than fixing a problem, right? And I use this to fix a lot of stuff on some of my more recent projects that I've worked on, where it was a drastic pose change, and I had that pose on multiple characters, or on multiple animations, and so I just fixed it in one and used an animation layer to fix that. So this is a pretty beneficial tool to have. Also, this bake keyframe thing can be kind of beneficial. Bless you. File, new scene. Don't save. So I'm going to make an interesting little experiment here. Let's do a box, sure. And let me see if I can think of how to do this. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make another box, Control D. I'm just going to put this one on top of it. All right. And I'm going to change my pivot point. Let's just change my pivot point to like right here, right? I need this to look like a little arm that's going to sort of bobble on there, right? I'm going to go ahead and freeze transformations on these, edit, delete by type, history, modify, freeze my transformations. And then I'm going to parent p-cube2 under p-cube1. Okay? And just really quickly, I'm going to make some up and down animation. This is going to be something really simple. In fact, what I'm going to do is hit S on frame 1. I'm going to go out here to say frame 450. Sure. Hit S. I'm just going to make my animation say 1 through 65. Hit now?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's see. So 1 through 65 here. And I'm going to animate just the up and down motion on this box. Okay. So my translate Y, I'm actually going to delete all those other keyframes. Everything except for translate Y. I don't really need them. I just want my translate Y. So we've looked at this before. I'm going to go curves, weighted tangents. And you remember when you had to do the graph editor arrow? Does everybody remember that terrible, terrible week? You did the graph editor arrow. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Keys, add key tool. I'm just going to put one down here. So I'm using middle click to add that key. All right, and so what I'm going to get is a little bit of a down motion. And then I want it to pop up kind of quickly. Right, overshoot with that. And then kind of settle here for a little bit. And then I want it to shoot down, back down here again, and then kind of come back up and settle, right? So we're just going to use like this as my motion, roughly. Right? So watch what we get. Down. Okay. So I really wanted that to be bigger than it is. So how do I make that bigger? How How do you give me some milk? So,
Question?
the way to make this entire motion bigger is to make those curves bigger, right? To make those curves go larger directions. Which key will do that? So all of the keys will do it. Which shortcut key will help me do that? So this is an easy one to forget. You can scale these curves, right? So I can obviously grab them and move all of them if I wanted to manually push all of this, right? Oh, I still have that soft select thing on. So it's under transformation tools. Just turn this back to constant. So I mean, I could obviously do this and push those, right? But sometimes my curve's really complicated. I can just grab all of them and hit R and scale from the center to make that motion bigger. This is a key element to what we're trying to do here, right? Because now my motion is more like that. So, not that big of a deal, right? We already kind of know that. But this still feels very stiff, right? So what I'm going to show you is that you can copy and paste keyframes. All this is data, right? And so all this data shows us is that our object anticipates down, so that value goes down. So translate y goes down. Translate y pops up kind of quickly, overshoots, and then settles back down to flat. And then translate y shoots back down and then kind of overshoots and settles back down to flat again, right? So it's just a value change. So that value can be applied to any channel, right? Including rotate, right? If I want to have a similar motion on my rotate key, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to frame 1. I'm going to hit S, so everything has some keys in here. And then I'm going to grab this curve. Now you have to be careful to only do this in the graph editor. Right? If I drag select all of these keys in the graph editor and hit Control C, if I go to my rotate Z, which is the object's rotation back and forth, right? I can just hit Control V here, grab that key, hit Control V, and I paste that same exact curve onto the rotation. Right? Now you can't really see it that much because because rotation is very small, right? A value change in rotation has to go 360 degrees. So again, I can grab all of these, hit scale, scale that way up, right? And what you're going to see now is a little bit more rotation on it. So that's kind of neat. Just with that, I didn't have to animate any rotation at all. I just copied my old rotation. Unfortunately, overlapping action. Overlapping action is a thing that everybody struggles with. I don't know why. All it means is that not everything happens at the same time, right? And so my translations are currently happening at the same exact time as my rotations. How do I fix that?
Drag the rotations a little bit further along the line.
Yeah, just make those keys happen at a different time, right? If I wanted to make this look like the little head or whatever this is like looking up first, I could grab all of these a little and move them, still on scale. I could grab all of these and move them just a little bit earlier, right? A couple frames earlier, and watch what happens now. So that's a totally different animation, right? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I wanted it to look like it happens a little later. Totally different animation. Okay, that's with one keyframe curve, right? And I copied and pasted that to get some results on this. The cool thing about this is this doesn't have to just be on one object, right? I could very easily grab that same curve, right? Let's go ahead and grab it for my. We'll go ahead and grab it for my rotate because that's good. Grab all of that, Control C. Again, Control C only from the graph editor. If I did Control C, Control V up here, it's going to duplicate the object, not the curve. So I'm going to select this object. It currently doesn't have any keyframes on it, my little thingy here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit S. And on its rotate Z, I'm going to paste those keyframes in there too, right? And so now I get that. Right? As you saw earlier, we had to drag that a little later to get that overlapping action. I had it on 2 frames. Let's go for like 4, and let's really scale that curve up. Right. Oop. Maybe make it happen another frame later. Now, what you may think is like that's going up too high. Like I wanted to overshoot, but I wanted to come back down lower. We can always still adjust these things, right? I can always still go in here and pull this back down however I want to. So I can adjust all of these however I want, right? Actually, I don't think I want that last little bit. So I think that's overshooting just a touch too high. In fact, what may be happening may be the other way around. Right now, when this dips down, I think I kind of want it to drag upward. So here's a quick trick. I can grab all of these curves and start scaling again, and just scale them until they go backwards, right? I could drag them backwards like this, and then I guess I can kind of manually make some adjustments here too if I want to, right? Oh, too much. So maybe like that. Now what happens a lot in animation is that we only animate in a few axes and stuff feels a little stiff. So to me, just getting a little bit of this motion on some of these other axes will help as well. So let's grab maybe like rotate Y, which is the twist. Let's go ahead and paste that curve on there too. See what that does. So just by adding a little bit of extra rotate, now that may be a little more than we want, so we can always scale it down. Right. And the cool thing about this is it works with all channels. So I can also scale. If I wanted to scale this in Y, Control V. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Right, now my scale is going 360 degree or 360 instead of like -1 or whatever. So let's just scale this way back to something reasonable. What's happening here? Oh, it's because I don't want it starting at 0. I want it starting at 1. So what I want to do is instead of pasting that whole keyframe, I'm going to go translate Y. I'm just going to grab these last few, Control C, and I want to paste it in at frame 6. So Control C. That way I get to keep my original scale, and it'll paste it in there, and then I can scale that up a little bit more. Actually, the other thing we can do is when you paste it, if you go to Paste Connect, so we can, instead of pasting it into there, we can do Paste Connect. That's not really working. Edit, Paste, and then choose this, I think it's Insert. These keys. Don't worry about it. I'll just scoot them up. And then make sure this kind of settles back to 1 again. So just by doing that, we get some squash and stretch. Again, way too much of it. All right, F. And again, I want this to kind of bounce back to 1. So it'd be roughly like that. So what I get now is that, right? I can make that happen maybe a frame earlier or 2, right? That way it feels like so. With all of this, I've done that without hitting the S key for a long time now, right? I've just been pasting in curves and reusing them. This is one of the reasons the graph editor is super important, super powerful, is that I can very quickly start getting some kind of dynamic animations just by like pasting some curves. Right? I've actually done this as a test for a full character animation, where I was able to basically, you remember when you were a kid, or possibly still yet, and you like playing with like G.I. Joes or Barbie or whatever, and they came in and was like, hey, and you move them around like this to make them talk. Well, that's kind of what you can do with a full character, right? You can make them like, right? And then if you get that right motion to like whatever audio you're looking for, you can use that as sort of a root motion to generate the rest of the character's action. Right? It really works with extremely cartoony stuff. So this is kind of a way you can kind of mess around with this to get sort of some different results. I want to show you one more thing, and this is less about a technique and more about a tool. So I want to go ahead and hit stop. Some of you are going to like this, some of you are not, but it's just a method of working. If you're ever in my office, we double click on a Maya file and it takes like 2 minutes for the file to open. That's partially because of this. AnimBot is a set of scripts that is currently free. It's not always going to be free. But these scripts are absolutely incredible, and they're all for animation. Okay, they're all like things that make your life easier animation-wise. If you want to try it, you can download it. It's animbot.ca. If you just Google AnimBot, you'll find it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll download this to my class folder under resources. It'll let me. Slow download. But I'm going to show you how to use a few of them and why they're handy. Okay, there it goes. So I'm just going to copy this to my computer, paste it. Extract it. 7-zip. And actually installing this is strangely easy. You're going to see in this folder, there's this AnimBot drag and drop install. So if you have Maya open and this folder open, all you got to do is drag this and drop it in your viewport and it will install it. Now what it's going to do is it's going to add me a whole bunch of extra tools along the bottom here. I don't even know how to use all of them. It's also going to take it a couple of minutes to install, I think, or a couple of seconds to install. Let's see. Install, yes. That's why I dragged and dropped it. These tools will eventually become pay tools, like things that a package you'd have to purchase. I don't care how much he's charging. I will buy it. Like if he's charging $1,000, I will buy these tools. Like that, I have never used a set of tools that are more helpful. Like these tools have already saved me $1,000. So let's look at what some of the things that you can do with it. All right, so let's go ahead and start setting some keyframes on this thing. Let's do a quick little bounce, maybe, right? On that middle one, raise it up there. So we get this curve. So just some of the things that you can do with this. One is you can put breakdown keys in here. Right? So let's say I wanted to ease out of this even more. Right? I can go right here, frame 6. There's no keyframe there, right? And I can add an in-between that favors the previous or next pose, right? So this helps with setting breakdown keys for character animation. So whenever you mouse over something, it'll give you a preview, but if I click it and drag it, you'll see it added a key, and it's either going to favor the one before it or the one after it, right? And so I want it to favor the one before, right? There's also the option, oh, I've already done this. Can you just give me a minute? I'm teaching. I'm sorry, let me go. Like, I've done this a dozen times. Why does it? Let's see if this is working. So let's say now if I wanted to overshoot this key, like I can drag it to the previous one, but it sticks at 100%, right? Okay. Seemed to work that time. So it sticks at 100% for this overshoot, right? We have this option to click this button right here, and it will take us even past that. So let's say I wanted to go past this next key here, right? For frame 10, I wanted to go a little bit past that. Now I can go to 100%, and then I can go even past 100%. So it would give me 100 and I think it's like 75%. So I can start adding my overshoots in like that, right? So I get this overshoot. And again, I can continue to like get really close and sort of ease into this. So this is a really nice like tool for like setting your easing. Something else that's really kind of cool on this is we have all of these green options, and if you click this little button here, there are like tons of other sliders in here, right? So for example, I have this curve selected. This is one I like. Let's say you need more or less keyframes on it, but you still want the curve to look pretty much the same. This SB curve will allow you to slide to either make it simpler or to make it almost every frame, right? So you can add or reduce the number of keys you have on this. So again, I can make this thing have keys on every frame, or I can reduce it. Now let's say we get motion capture data like this, right? And we're like, man, that is just a lot of keys on there, and I really just want to change the easing on how this eases in and out of these curves. I can grab whole selections of curves, and that's what this original EA is for, is I can ease all of those curves in and out from each other. So I can have it either, let's just set all that to auto, sorry. I can either have all of this easing in or out with all of these curves at once. All right. A couple of other really nice things that are in here. This button right here will open up a set of selection sets. So I can create a selection set for my sphere, but you could also do one for your entire character. You can do one for your character's arm, and then that's just a button you can click to select that whenever you want. Right? There's a whole bunch of neat stuff in here, including a temporary pivot. So let's say I had 20 spheres in here. Let's not do 20. Let's do 4. Right. I'm going to set a keyframe on there. Let's go back to frame 1 and set it. Right. What this temporary pivot will do, so this button right here, is it will create a pivot point for that collection of objects, and then I can put it over here and animate those objects into a new position. Select them and hit S. Right? Stupid auto key. So they're all there. I go out to here, choose that pivot point again, rotate them, and it's auto keying them over to there. Now, if I were to tween that, that doesn't look very good, right? But I could do that sort of a frame at a time or a section at a time. So I could do something like that, and then go a little bit further, like that. And what this is doing is it's just setting keyframes on those individual spheres, right? And so I kind of faked them kind of going around a corner, and all it's doing is setting keyframes on each of these spheres, right? There's just a ton of tools in here. We also have a better arc tracking tool, which will allow me to create an arc in there. This is actually timeline bookmarks, to where you can bookmark sections of your timeline and see what they are. There's just all sorts of neat stuff in here, including keyframe tools, and there's something else in here that I thought was pretty cool. Oh yeah, some copy and paste animation tools. So like, I've used a lot of these. I can tell you that there's a lot of use for these tools if you want to give them a test drive. This is not a requirement by any means, but it has sped up the way that I animate, and like I said, I will happily pay whatever this dude wants to charge for them. Okay. Questions? So let's think about that milk question one more time. When I asked you, I really don't even like milk that much. I mean, I'll drink it in my cereal and stuff, but. So when I asked you to get me some milk, we all recognized that cow was the option, right? That is the source of milk, right? The way we solve problems is we look at what our final outcome needs to be, right? Which is, in that case, Greg has a cup of milk in his hand, right? What is the most efficient way of making that happen? What is the smartest way of making that happen? Hey, can somebody let her in the back? And so, like, cow was not the smartest answer. Cow was not the easiest answer. Cow was not the most efficient answer, right? The store across the way on campus, or whatever, Kroger, all of those answers are easier, more efficient, like smarter solutions, right? That's what we're looking at when we're solving animation problems, or really any problem, right? Is what is the smartest way to solve that problem, the way that's most efficient or convenient, right? And so really, the only major tool we've familiarized you with is setting keyframes, right? What I'm trying to do today is show you that there are smarter ways of setting keyframes and smarter ways of leveraging this tool. Now, still a good, probably 90% of the animation that I do is still manually moving stuff and setting keyframes and going into the graph editor and editing. right? But I just kind of wanted to show you some tools from the toolbox that may be able to make that more efficient, or may be able to, give you buy you an extra 30 minutes by the end of this project that, in time that you have saved, that you can dedicate to some other portion of it, right? Questions, comments, any ideas, any things you're like, how could I do that? Okay. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, upload the video, and rest of class today will be me kind of hanging out, answering any questions you have. I think there's only really about 15 or 20 minutes left. I can spend a little bit of time next class period showing you that face rig. I have something now, I just think it's too many steps to show in a class demonstration. And if it starts becoming too long, what I'll end up doing is just making a video for you. I think what I've tried to do though is I've tried to make it a really complex 2D face rig. But recognize that it's all really just your object looking at different images. The only issue with how I'm doing it right now too is how it looks in the viewport is not going to be particularly pretty. You're going to have to look at your render every now and then to see what the render actually looks like. Just because the viewport doesn't have a live update for these types of materials that work that great. So, all right, cool. We'll pick this up next class period. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you soon.